Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first interlude. This is something I'm going to be starting doing every 10 videos. You might notice that we just had episode 10 that got published, and so now this is like a not really episode, an in-between episode, where we're going to stop, look at the game so far, look at the new characters that have been introduced, make some predictions about what's going to happen, and just, talk a little bit about the game as it stands right now. When I kind of think about why people watch Let's Plays, I think a lot of it is to both re-experience the game and then hear people's thoughts as they play, but very, very often I'm not able to think of everything I want to talk about right in the moment. So this is just sort of a way to stop and actually have a segmented time for me to say, okay, now I'm going to really I don't want to say tear this game apart, but really look into what is happening and analyze it. If it's not your thing, that's totally understandable and acceptable and cool. But if it is your thing, then it also means that if you played the game before, you don't have to keep up with the Let's Play. You can just look for these specific ones and say, okay, let's see what she thinks when she got to this specific part. So, with that said, for those that aren't watching the Let's Play, we actually just got to the second realm, and we ran into Law, and Zephyr got captured. That's where I am in the game right now. It's not really a spoiler warning, you should not be watching this without having played the game, or at the very least been watching the playthrough, so don't think that'll be a major issue. So, first of all, let's go ahead and start with Iron Mask, or Alphen. Iron Mask is, ironically enough, the character I have the least to say about. I don't want to pass judgment on him yet. Obviously we're only 10 episodes in. I don't know how long this will be, but it'll probably be at least 60 to 70 episodes. I've had Tales games go into the mid 100s, but I do cut a little bit more, so I doubt we'll get that. I don't doubt we'll get that high. But the big problem I have with Alphen is that he's kind of a lump right now. He doesn't want anyone to be enslaved, and he's nice to people, and that's largely his whole character that I can figure out. They've added a couple of extra things to try and make him interesting, but I don't really think those worked, because oh, he can't feel pain, except to be honest, I don't really buy that, because most people I know, I don't personally know anyone that can't feel pain. Most people who can't feel pain that I've heard about are paranoid and constantly checking themselves all the time because they know they could just bleed to death and never know about it. But Alphen is just rambunctious and reckless and just gets himself hurt all the fucking time. And I'm just it feels like something they put in there because they wanted a character trait they could reference, but I'm not sold on it, if that makes sense. And then kind of the same thing with the ongoing thing about him wearing the mask but still being able to see perfectly fine. Bugged me to death until the mask came off. I also do want to say that him having amnesia and then remembering that his name was Alphen. And I feel bad. I feel like I'm already bitching, and I do enjoy the game. If you guys know me, I always am going to do stuff like that. I'm always going to be very, very, very critical of the things that I care about. And it's always easier to establish what doesn't work than establish what does. So, but yeah, the remembering his name, I actually really like stories where, as you go through, you learn more and more and more about what's going on. Even if it's the protagonist, you do something, you go to a place, and then the guy's oh, wait, that's right. I recognize this place. This is where this happened. Those are cool. I like those. The issue I have with Alphen remembering his name is that we didn't do anything to cause that to happen. He channeled a whole bunch of firepower into the Master Orb, and then suddenly he just miraculously remembered his name. There was nothing that really, made that make sense. There's no linear connection, and sometimes people do just randomly remember things after a time of having forgotten. I'm not saying it's impossible, it just wasn't narratively satisfying to remember his name at that moment. I felt like they were oh, we've revealed his face, we need to give him a name now. But it would have been nice if there was some sort of, he recognizes the land beyond the fire gate that he had just destroyed, or he sees his reflection, and upon seeing his face, actually, he's like, wait, I'm Alf, something that would at least make it a little bit more meaningful rather than just, I almost turned myself into a flaming popsicle, and by the way, my name's Alphen. So, Shion is interesting, but also oversold. So like, it seems very, very, very clear that her character is that she's got thorns that she can't control. I don't think she has anything to do with it, even if she doesn't mean to. Anyone that touches her gets hurt. And so kind of like, Jubilee from X-Men, she just basically feels like she can't get close to anyone. She feels like that the closer she gets to someone, the more alien it will feel. The fact that she can't actually make physical contact with them. So she's just actively trying to push everyone away from her. She's being a bitch and she wants to keep everyone at arm's length. And that's very, very understandable. It makes sense given what they've told us about her. But my god, they've reestablished this point, I swear, 8 times. Very, very, very firmly. To the point where even, Zephyr is calling her out. It's like, game, we get it. I understand what is happening with Shion. You don't have to keep selling it, I promise. I also do think Shion is the most interesting character going into the future of the game. Because I know I've talked this in the Let's Play already, but I am making this in the theory that some people will watch this, and, without having watched the playthrough, because they just played the game before. Obviously, if that's you, don't confirm or deny anything I'm saying. Let me speculate. This is more for letting you know what I'm thinking as I'm playing through the game. But, what I'm really running into here is that Shion has the Master Core from, Balsef, and because she owns the Master Core, I think that gives her, a attachment to the, all of the collected essence from the enslaved that Balsef had. And to a certain extent, I think that might mean that she has taken Balsef's place in the Crown game, especially now that he's dead. She's the next logical ruler of that area. I've already forgotten the name of the first area. I'm terrible. But if that's the case, and she goes through, and she and Alphen go through and, topple all of the 5 lords, then by default, doesn't that basically mean that Shion wins the Crown game and becomes the, de facto ruler of, Dania? It's not Dania, but it's something like that. It's Rena and... I'm terrible with names, you guys. I wrote down a lot of the names so I wouldn't, scrub up, but I didn't write the names of the places. Whoopsie! Moving on to Zephyr. I'm actually really, really glad that we're recording this when we did. Because I gotta tell you, if I had been recording this an episode ago, I'd be like, I like Zephyr. Zephyr's interesting. Zephyr is impressively and amazingly enough, the intellectual of the group. Very philosopher, you have to treat people right, even when they're the enemy. And it's really surprising considering that he's the leader of a, rebel faction trying to overthrow the enemy, that he has that much respect for the people he's fighting against. And frankly, it was a borderline unbelievable that he would be that level-headed. People with that amount of level-headedness don't become the leaders of rebel groups and try and overthrow places. So, because that did happen, what I have to conclude, what I have to see, what I have to say, is that it really, really, really feels to me that the revelation of Law and the fact that he used to be in the ice area, but was apparently run out, and his son became an informant. I think he's led a uprising before that went really, really badly, and he had to flee. It's no, Caligula is not Caligula, but that's the fireplace. I really feel like he's from the ice place, and the reason everyone is so suspicious and untrustworthy of everyone else is because the Renans over there actually made the Big Brother system. And so now Zephyr is very much in, when you actually attain achievable results, the way in which you treat the conquered is as important as conquering them in the first place. Because otherwise you just make an eternal... I feel like Zephyr may have actually had some success in the ice place. I should look this place up. I should pause and look it up, but I'm not going to. But that's kind of where I feel like he is. And I really think that the inclusion of Law is going to be a very, very, very telling into like Zephyr's backstory. I do think that like they've got to resolve that. I think Law is going to end up at least becoming a helpful NPC, if not outright joining the party, for the very, very simple reason that they can't. Like, Zephyr is never going to come to a point where he's going to be comfortable killing his son. That just doesn't make sense for his character. So they've got to have Law stop being someone who will fight against us, because then we can never resolve that conflict. The only real resolution for that is either Zephyr is killed and that gives us free leash to kill Law, which would be a super downer. Like, oh my god, that would not be okay. Or Law stops working for the Bird Watchers. Oh my god, I'm so bad. The Silver Swords is the mercenary group, but I've forgotten what the informants are. It's some kind of bird, though. I remember that. Rinwell as well. Rinwell's also actually really interesting. I like her a lot. I didn't like her until very recently. Like, for a good long while, I kind of felt like her big point was to make Xion look a little less racist. Because that was the thing for like the first 7 episodes or so, maybe 8 episodes, it was like neither Alphen or Zephyr actually were that intolerant of Renans. Like, they regularly came to her defense, and even the other Daemons were basically just like, oh, it's a Renan. Are you sure? And then they'd be like, yes, and they'd be like, okay, cool. So Xion was always like, coming in and it's like, oh, working with a Renan is too much for you. And it always just seemed like she was super defensive over it for no reason, because no one was attacking her. So to go from that over to have Rinwell come in, and Rinwell being super intolerant of Renans, and just outright like, no, I can't, I'm not okay with this, and to logically understand that her objections didn't make sense, but to not emotionally be able to get past those objections. Like, Rinwell added a lot to kind of flesh out the world and show the sort of treatment that Xion's been going through. Because most Renans don't ever interact with Daemons in any significant amount. So most of them wouldn't have to deal with this, but Xion definitely has been. So I do like Rinwell. It's also very interesting, though, that she is our connection to the Silver Swords, when also apparently she's been in hiding her whole life. So I don't actually know that Rinwell knows anything about the Silver Swords. It would be really interesting. The Silver Swords might actually be Zephyr's old organization, and Rinwell's just heard about them and used the Silver Sword in order to get Zephyr to come along, even though she's never made contact with them. That'd be amazing. I don't necessarily think that's what's going to happen, but I think it's completely plausible, because the mage has been in hiding forever, and so I almost wonder if a lot of her information is just like rumors. And then the last thing I want to talk about, obviously this is not going to be a super long episode, but this is just my thoughts on the game as we're going on. Those are all the significant characters that have been introduced. I will say I'm not going to say anything else about Law. We know nothing about Law, so it wouldn't really make sense to have a big deep like, oh, here's what I think's going to happen to Law. Like, I have no basis to think anything about Law right now, but I do want to talk a little bit about Balseph. Balseph is super underdeveloped. Like, he just seemed like a mustache-twirling villain for the sake of being a villain. I don't know anything about him other than he's pompous. So, that's not unusual for the Tales games. I know in Tales of Symphonia, a lot of the cardinals were like that, where you would just sort of like go into an area and there'd be a cardinal and you'd beat up the cardinal. And eventually you got to the, like head of the church, but, or the 3 people in charge, but the actual cardinals just kind of seem like throwaway villains, and that may be where we're going with this. But it does give me a bit of a concern, because it does seem like right now the game is developing into go into this region, overthrow the Lord, then go into the next region. which means that we aren't actually able to build up any tension about fighting the next lord, because the first time we really meet them is the battle where we kill them. So it's not quite like, by contrast, in like Abyss, or in like Vesperia, you had several encounters with the members of the Church in Abyss, or like Luger and Droit and Gauche. Like, you would run into them multiple times, and you would fight them, and you'd manage to get what you wanted and drive them off. But it kind of made them an ongoing, increasing threat level, until finally you had a real fight with them, and that was the resolution, but it was a nice building resolution until it got to a climax. And right now we're not getting that with the Lords, and I hope that changes. I hope we have some ongoing real enemy, and it's not just going to be a... the other one that did this really badly, in my opinion, is Grace's. Where Grace's, if you remember, not counting the Future Arc was actually done well, but in Grace's you like chased Richard around the world and never actually caught him until the very end of the game, in which case you caught him and beat him, and that was the whole like that's a shitty arc. You're basically just running around trying to catch him the whole game. Like, at the beginning it was good, but then you just lost sight of him for like 3/4 of the game. So yeah, that's kind of my concern with where things are going. I do hope we get better villainy going forward, because Balseph, I don't really like. The fight against him was cool, but it didn't narratively. It's one of those things that, like, we saw the effects of his rule, and so undoing that felt good, but actually Balseph himself didn't really seem to exist. Maybe it's because we never actually saw him taking any active role in the oppression. I don't know, something to think about. Regardless, more episodes up and coming. And get ready, get excited, and see you then.